Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cambodia Global Dialogue. My name is Siphana. Before we move on to our main program of the week, which is about banking and finance in the context of the global financial crisis, let me just say a few words about Cambodia Global Dialogue. The Cambodia Global Dialogue is an initiative of Southeast Asia TV. The idea is to promote better understanding of the various global and regional issues which may affect Cambodia. As you all know, the world is moving very fast. Globalization is moving fast, regionalization is moving fast, and its effect is also having some consequence on the country. The idea of having this global dialogue is to engage international renowned personality, national personality, local personality, to come and discuss way to exploit the experience that they have acquired, throughout their life experience, and try to see how we can exchange a dialogue, how we can pass this knowledge base to the Cambodian viewer, to the Cambodian stakeholder, and how we can use this lesson learned to better advance the development agenda of the royal government of Cambodia. In this context, we feel that we have an opportunity to bring people who can share some quite interesting perspective, particularly in the finance and banking industry. Today, we have the pleasure to have Mr. Billheimer. Welcome, Dieter. Dieter is born, raised, and educated in southern Germany, and he's educated in finance and banking. He has a very prominent career in the banking industry, working with Dresdner Bank, Commerce Banks in the early 1970s, and held numerous senior positions for almost 2 decades in Germany, in overseas, London, New York, Chicago, Paris, and Hong Kong. In the 1990s, before the transfer of Hong Kong sovereignty to mainland China, Dieter worked as an independent director for a consortium of financial advisors in the banking industry in Hong Kong. Toward the end of 1999, Dieter has decided to move to Cambodia. I think one of his passion is also Cambodian culture. He's married to a Cambodian girl. So in this context, we're happy to have him here. Currently, he's a advisor of the board and senior management of Canadian Bank, one of the oldest and most prominent bank in Cambodia. And he's also advising on international development finance issue with the various international organizations like European Commission and other larger institutions in the area of banking, microfinance, and SME development. Welcome, Dieter.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
Dieter, the topic today is about banking and finance in the context of the global financial crisis. Later on, I would definitely want to see, to hear a bit your perspective as it affects the Cambodia in the recent year and as also its prospect for the future. But before we move to the national context, perhaps you can set a bit the stage, because people are very preoccupied nowadays with the issue of this global financial crisis. But in recent months, there are some perception that there's some recovery. What do you think?
There are always 2 answers to a subject, and it was not only a global financial crisis, it was also a economical crisis which followed the financial crisis, and I believe in 2 answers. Firstly, we know now that import and export issues are picking up, especially in the Western countries, whereas the main importers are China, Brazil, India, and within the European Union and America. But it is not actually over with that kind of crisis. I believe that right now a lot of companies worldwide actually only replacing their old equipment where they waited for 2-3 years to invest in new technology, etc., in new machinery, and therefore the really export countries like Germany picking up within that end of the global and economical crisis. But I believe, personally believe, that this crisis is not over yet. And I could explain to you why.
Could you? Could you?
Look at America. We start with America. The property crisis, the housing crisis is not over yet, is not solved yet. The purchasing and selling issues of existing housing is basically at a low level which we have not seen for 40 years. New houses are picking up, but on the basis of a very low level. Therefore, this crisis is not over yet. This is point number one. Point number two is we just talked all the past years about a housing crisis of the individual people. The next crisis will be the commercial property crisis in the United States, for my opinion. The third crisis, which nobody is hardly touching, is the crisis of a huge amount of credit card debt, which has arisen especially in the United States. Nobody or very few people pay back their credit card debt. And this credit card debt is increasing alone by 20% by means of interest on the unpaid credit cards. We are not talking about millions, we are talking about a huge amount of billions, which is in the hundreds of billions. This has to be solved too within the next few years. This is United States. Then the second one is, coming to banking and finance, banks are very reluctant to lend in interbank matters within each other. They simply don't do it, or just do it on a very low scale. This is why also the government in most countries of the industrialized nations went in and helped. Thirdly, banks are very reluctant to use their own capital to on-lend to the private sector. Still, this is a fact. And they they ask for new collateral, they ask for new measures. They don't really dig into the financing of the small and medium enterprise business. I'm only talking about the West. I'm not talking about Cambodia. And this has to change. And then we talk about in 1, 2, 3 years that the global financial and economic crisis is over or is on the place of recovery.
Well, so basically what you're trying to say is that the economic recovery is not, as fast as one would want to see. And I can see also some linkage into the context of Cambodia, because if the US and the European economy is not moving fast enough in their recovery, it does affect Cambodia in the context of trade also, because we are primarily exporting quite a bit of our garment to the US and also to the EU. So there are certain links into the Cambodian context. Perhaps in this perspective, how do you see the finance and banking sector in the region? Southeast Asia, for example, are there some issue or some prospect for much faster recovery, being in a dynamic region as Southeast Asia and Asia, for that matter?
As far as the banking sector and finance sector in Cambodia is concerned, we had nothing to worry, because we basically have no interbank market. We do not finance ourselves or refinance ourselves by means of asking international banks for loans. We refinance us simply, at least the local banks, refinance us simply by means of deposit of the general public and the companies based here in Cambodia. And when you look at the finance and banking sector 6-7 years ago, the deposit rate and the deposit amount was very, very low, because people had to learn to trust banks again. Since a couple of years, our deposits are increasing and increasing and increasing. And we are standing around $6 billion of deposits right now. And I personally believe, as an advisor, that there are still a couple of billions around somewhere lying, traditionally, like in Europe after the Second World War, under the mattress, wherever they try to hide the money. And we will, I believe, very optimistically get this type of deposits within the next few years. The banking sector grew immensely with a rate of about 30 to 50, 60% until 2008. Then it slowed down, and we are happy that it slowed down in a sense, because we can consolidate, we can bring new innovative ideas, new innovative products, etc. All the banks are doing that. And one of the banks is my bank, and we are always leading in that aspect in innovative products, and I'm very happy about that.
Dieter, back to Cambodia. The government has been very conscious of the potential impact of this global financial crisis, and one of the measure that I felt has helped quite a bit in stimulating a bit the recovery is the introduction of a law on foreign ownership of real estate, and I think it has some early positive effect in the sense that it does enable some foreign investor to come and get into the real estate, purchase in Cambodia. You see some good movement in that direction?
I see good movement in that direction, and that was a perfect move of the royal government of Cambodia. I'm not only talking about pure investors of going into Cambodia and buying now an apartment. I see especially people, and there are some initiatives of international banks from France, from Germany, not only from Asia, who are luring pensioners into the idea of coming to Cambodia. Cambodia is a beautiful country. Cambodia has a pleasant climate. Cambodia, since a few years, you can basically buy everything as far as food stuff is concerned. There is no problem anymore. You won't die of hunger. You get anything you want. So I believe that Cambodia will also be a new country for pensioners, Cambodian and Westerners alike, Cambodian who live overseas and Westerners alike, to come back to Cambodia for their retirement, not only to do business. And they will spend an immense amount of money because, as you know, Westerners have this pension fund, social security system, and they will spend their money here in Cambodia, which is very good for the economic future of the country.
Interesting perspective on this ownership by foreigner for some of our buildings, apartment or something like this. But I would also want to look a bit from the commercial real estate development. I can see that in the last couple of years, I think Canadian Bank has led this movement of building high-rise. You have the first tower, of course, but now you see the development of other tower. You know, the 42 Tower, the Watanabe Bank Tower, and other few larger and medium-sized tower. So these commercial building, at one point in time, they will be completed, and they will be needing, prospect for renting these commercial spaces. Do you see a good market opportunity? Do you see demand? You see demand for this sort of commercial real estate leasing? Because Cambodia, I don't know, but for me, we're sort of used to have a nice villa, have a garden, we have an office there. But moving into a high-rise tower, it's a little bit un-Cambodian, but maybe I'm wrong.
Talking about these few thousand NGOs who are working in the country, and talking about companies coming into the country, especially from the Western world, they are basically not used to have their office in a private villa or in a house. So they will be the first ones looking for commercial property.
So in other words, what is considered as a cultural clash in our context is more a cultural adjustment, or you know.
Yes, it will help definitely the country, because it is a different philosophy in the wide world of business, which does not actually comply with the cultural ideas in Cambodia of the Cambodian people.
So you are optimistic that this commercial tower, commercial big building there will have good demand for that?
Yes, I'm very optimistic, and I am also optimistic that that the offer and the demand will regulate the price. We are a free marketplace in Cambodia, which I always enjoyed very much.
Yeah. Dieter, moving a bit toward the larger effort of the Royal government to attract foreign direct investment since the peace process, the UN arrival in '93, there's been a very strong, conscious effort to pass the investment law to attract foreign direct investment. And so far in the last decade or so, the Cambodian government has been quite successful in attracting this sort of FDI. But I see the last couple of years, there's a strong drive, strong motivation, strong political will to move toward the establishment of a stock exchange and hopefully complementing the foreign direct investment with the portfolio investment. My understanding is that, you know, Canadian Bank, or at least one of your subsidiary, has been awarded a investment license in the future stock exchange. What's your view on that? You think Cambodia can have a market large enough to justify this sort of you know, a portfolio investment?
Let's say politically and economically, it's definitely justified to have a stock exchange here in Cambodia. We can question whether we can start fully with a number of companies, which we definitely will not. We are talking about 4 to 6 companies in the beginning. I think it will, firstly, we will have a kind of bond market, whether the government and also private companies like our bank will issue bonds after the legislation will have the laws in place. And afterwards we will look at the stock market, and it will go, for my opinion, slow, which is good for the country because we will learn out of it, of the IPOs, etc. And it will go on. We should not price ourselves out of the market, which I said already in several interviews with newspapers. We should not make the same mistake than it has been done in Vietnam, where they put the issue price too high, and then the market after a few months died down, and the prices went simply lower. But these lessons, I think, with our friends from the stock exchange in Korea and with other friends from Hong Kong and Singapore and all the expertise coming in, we will learn and we will not probably make the same mistakes.
Interesting perspective in the sense that, you know, we have a neighbor which has started their stock exchange a few years ago. And for me, I think lesson learned is interesting more if it is in a regional context where you can relate it to the country, you can relate to the region. But your view as a more so as a Western banker, German banker, European banker, what is your perspective on the development of our stock exchange here for a least developed country like Cambodia, where, you know, the market is still very young, the market is still very much developing, emerging? What would be your advice?
My advice would be not only to focus on a stock exchange in Phnom Penh. We should also look at a stock exchange, for example, in the provinces like Battambang or Siem Reap or Sihanoukville for the upcoming new markets there, for the deep sea port and the companies who will move there. I think we can start with Phnom Penh, but we should look also into regional stock exchanges in Cambodia. Not many, perhaps 2 to 3. I just mentioned a few. Cities which I consider as a possible place for another regional provincial stock exchange.
Are you saying that, Cambodia, as small as it is, still have the, room for provincial issue, perhaps more in the development of the commodity
Of
exchange?
the commodity, for example, cash crops.
Yeah, cash crop.
Rice, etc., etc. And of course we should limit this type of stock exchange. Can be also an over-the-counter trading, which you can do as underwriter, as far as I believe and as far as I learned. Also, stock exchange as a kind of commodity trading would be very interesting, because don't forget, Siphana, Cambodia used to be a major agricultural country in the 50s and 60s, one of the major countries in the world. And we should follow that issue also in the future. And I believe the royal government of Cambodia, since a few years also focus on that. We don't want to be a highly specialized country of doing high-tech products or whatever. We should focus firstly on what we know best, which is agriculture and aquaculture. And not only producing 2-3 times a year instead of 1 time a year these cash crops, but also processing. Why leave it to our neighbors? Our market itself is very small for consumption, but look at the export. Look at Europe. Look at the ASEAN +2, which we have a few billion people. Look at these export issues and bring investors in for that type of issues. That can be done also through the stock exchange.
Dieter, you touch on a very sensitive issue here, which is how to, turn Cambodia into a rice or agriculture player as we once were in the 70s or the 60s. You probably followed the last couple of weeks the royal government of Cambodia, Samdech Kadacho Prime Minister, has launched the rice export policy. To me, I think the policy orientation is there. The potential has been identified. The player has been brought into a sort of structured partnership, public-private sector, provincial authority, rice miller, the government more in terms of supporting the infrastructure, in terms of irrigation, in terms of road transport. The port has been rethinking how they can reorganize their port operation to accommodate more the sort of larger commodity, bulky agriculture transaction. From the banking and finance perspective, how do you see the role of not just Canadian Bank, but of other bank Cambodia, which now almost 30 banks now? The criticism in the past is that the bank has not been too much involved in supporting agriculture development. They're more focused into real estate development, land transaction, building, that sort of thing. I believe that the bank have a big role, not only in export finance, but in other aspects along this agriculture value chain. What's your view on that?
I believe that all bankers who heard that statement have been very happy that the Prime Minister expressed the clear political will of the royal government in Cambodia and focused very clearly what can be done and how guarantees of the government can come in case of loan failures. And the bankers have to act, very clearly have to act. They have to go and come away with this philosophy, which was good in the past, and I'm happy with that, that loans are given solely by means of collateral as far as property titles are concerned. The banks have to look whether a loan, and they will do and look alone with their existing clientele through their own branches. And Canada Bank alone has about 25 branches, and we'll add another 4 until the end of the year. But also other banks have to focus on the new philosophy of taking collateral. Collateral does not have to be always a land title. Collateral can be a warehouse full of rice or cashew nuts or anything else. Collateral can be machinery. Collateral can be equipment. We simply have to change our view a bit about collateral versus loan issues. And that will happen within the next 2 years. Then we should also look into the possibility of having syndicated loans, that not only one bank is financing a large project, 2 or 3 banks are coming together with one leading bank and finance, for example, a huge rice mill or a huge drying facility for corn, etc. That will also be discussed in the future among banks. Canada Bank definitely is looking for a number of years now into the possibility to increasing their exposure into agriculture and aquaculture. This is a fact.
That's a good move in the right direction. You mentioned a new way of thinking a bit from the banker perspective, a bit toward production, not just to support the production of the rice, but also the potential investment in the processing aspect of it. You know, the goal of the Royal Government in the next several years is to get to 1 million tons of paddy rice export. That's a lot of rice, and it's a lot of money involved in terms of export credit facility, in terms of investing into the processing, the warehousing. So I'm glad that the bank is looking for that direction in terms of positioning their role as banker, as financier, to support the development of the Royal Government policy toward making Cambodia once again one of the rice exporter, not just rice, agriculture exporter in Southeast Asia, and to be recognized once again in the world of development, that we have the potential and we will work to achieve this potential. Dieter, I think we're coming to the end of our program. Maybe I can just summarize briefly a bit the gist of what we discussed, and hopefully a few lessons we can draw. You know, one of the things that strike me the most in your intervention is that you see a strong role of the bank and the financial institution in Cambodia to take part in the larger development of this country. In particular, in the agriculture, where the potential is enormous, but also in the development of a new market for real estate development, commercial real estate development, but as well in the ability to play a good role in the attraction of foreign portfolio investment to the country. And for a country, a least developed country like Cambodia, I think being able to attract fresh source of money to support fresh source of growth is very important. So on that note, I want to say thank you, Dieter, and I hope we have an opportunity to see each other again in future, and perhaps we can pick another much more focused area of agriculture financing or export financing, for that matter.
There's plenty to talk about.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dieter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our program today, which is about banking and finance in the context of a global financial crisis. And we have the pleasure today to have Dieter Billheimer, and senior advisor of one of the big banks in Cambodia, Canadian Bank. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity to share some of our perspective on the Cambodia development in the context of this banking financial sector. I hope to see you next week again for the next topics of Cambodia global dialogue. Thank you. Goodbye.